I'm Diane, and I'm 28. The lawyer just finished reading my grandmother's will, and my entire family is staring at me like I've grown a second head. 30 days in her abandoned mansion to claim my inheritance. No cell service, no money, no support. My mother actually laughed out loud when the condition was announced. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely alone in a room full of family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. The thing about being the family disappointment is that everyone assumes you'll fail before you even try. My brother Marcus was already calculating his share of grandmother's estate. My sister Sarah was texting someone, probably her husband, about vacation plans they'd make with my inheritance money. Mom kept shaking her head with that familiar expression of disgusted resignation. Diane can't even keep a houseplant alive, Sarah muttered, not bothering to lower her voice. 30 days alone, she'll be back in 3. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, cleared his throat uncomfortably. The will is quite specific. Miss Diane must remain in the property for 30 consecutive days and nights. Any departure, regardless of reason, forfeits the inheritance. My father leaned forward. What exactly is this inheritance worth? $2 million plus the mansion and surrounding 10 acres, Patterson replied. The room went dead silent. $2 million. That was more money than I'd ever imagined my grandmother had. She'd lived so simply, driving that old Buick and clipping coupons religiously. Marcus found his voice first. That's impossible. Grandmother never had that kind of money. Your grandmother was quite wealthy, Patterson explained patiently. She invested wisely and lived frugally. The estate has been professionally managed for decades. My mother's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. This is ridiculous. Diane doesn't deserve that money. She barely visited. Actually, I visited every Sunday for the past 3 years, bringing groceries and helping with household repairs. But why let facts ruin a good narrative? My family had this charming habit of selective memory when it came to my contributions. The mansion has been vacant for 6 months since Mrs. Peterson's passing, Patterson continued. Basic utilities are functional, but the property has been neglected. Neglected how? I asked, speaking for the first time since the reading began. Patterson hesitated. The house requires significant maintenance. There have been some unusual occurrences reported by neighbors. Nothing confirmed, of course. Great. A probably haunted mansion with no cell service and a family hoping I'd fail. This was shaping up to be either the worst month of my life or the most transformative. Sarah rolled her eyes. Unusual occurrences, please, it's just an old house. My family spent the next hour trying to convince me not to attempt the challenge. For people who supposedly cared about my well-being, they seemed awfully invested in my failure. Mom suggested I sign away my inheritance rights immediately. Dad offered to have the will contested. Marcus even mentioned that 30 days was a long time for someone with your limitations. By the time we left Patterson's office, I was more determined than ever to prove them wrong. The mansion stood like something from a Gothic novel, all weathered stone and towering windows that reflected nothing but darkness. I pulled my Honda into the circular driveway, gravel crunching under the tires as my headlights swept across overgrown gardens and a fountain that clearly hadn't run in years. October in New England meant early darkness and that bone-deep chill that seeps through even the warmest jacket. I'd packed enough supplies for a week, figuring I could assess the situation and plan accordingly. The nearest town was 12 miles away, and my family had made it abundantly clear they wouldn't be checking on me. The front door key felt ancient in my hands, heavy brass that required significant force to turn. When the door finally opened, it revealed an entrance hall that belonged in a museum. Marble floors stretched toward a grand staircase while crystal chandeliers hung like expensive ghosts overhead. Electricity worked, thankfully. Grandmother had arranged for basic utilities to remain active. The heating system rumbled to life when I located the thermostat, though the house felt like it would take days to warm properly. My footsteps echoed as I explored the first floor. Formal dining room with seating for 20. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a rolling ladder. 3 separate sitting rooms, each decorated in increasingly elaborate styles. The kitchen was surprisingly modern, renovated within the last decade with professional-grade appliances and granite countertops. But something felt wrong. Not supernatural wrong, just off. Cabinet doors hung slightly open. Drawers weren't quite closed. Small items seemed shifted from their natural positions. Someone had been here recently. The refrigerator contained only bottled water and basic condiments, their expiration dates still months away. Fresh groceries that hadn't been there when grandmother died. The logical explanation was that Patterson's office had arranged for basic supplies, but something about the careful organization suggested more personal attention. Upstairs, I found 14 bedrooms, each with its own personality and period furniture. Grandmother's master suite felt like a sanctuary, with windows overlooking the back gardens and a sitting area arranged around a fireplace. This would be my base camp for the next month. Night fell with surprising swiftness. Without the constant glow of city lights, the darkness here felt absolute. I made dinner from canned soup and crackers, eating alone in the vast kitchen while October wind rattled windows throughout the house. That's when I heard the first sound that couldn't be explained by settling wood or heating systems. Footsteps. Deliberate, measured steps moving across the floor above me. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth, listening intently. The footsteps stopped directly overhead, then resumed, pacing back and forth in what I calculated was the long hallway outside the bedrooms. My heart rate picked up, but I forced myself to think logically. Old houses made noise. Expanding and contracting wood could sound like anything, but these footsteps had rhythm, pattern. They paused at regular intervals, as if someone was examining things along the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs, my own footsteps impossibly loud on the wooden stairs. The hallway was empty, exactly as I'd left it, but the air felt different. Warmer in some spots, cooler in others, like someone had just passed through. Nothing appeared disturbed, but I had the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Day 3 brought the first real challenge to my sanity. I'd settled into a routine of sorts. Coffee in the sunroom each morning, exploring different sections of the house during the day, reading in the library each evening. The footsteps had continued nightly, always in the same pattern, always stopping when I investigated. But this morning was different. I came downstairs to find the kitchen rearranged. Nothing dramatic, just small changes that someone else might miss. The coffee maker had been moved 6 inches to the left. Cabinet doors I'd closed were slightly ajar. Most unsettling, fresh flowers sat in a vase on the counter. White roses that definitely hadn't been there the night before. My hands shook as I examined the roses. They were real, recently cut, with droplets of water still clinging to the petals. Someone had been in the house while I slept. Someone with a key and knowledge of my grandmother's preferences. She'd always loved white roses. I searched every room methodically, looking for signs of intrusion or hidden passages. The mansion was built in 1892, plenty of time for secret rooms or forgotten entrances, but my inspection revealed only elaborate molding and solid walls. The day passed without incident until afternoon, when I discovered my grandmother's private study behind the library. The door was concealed behind a bookshelf that moved when I accidentally leaned against it while reaching for a volume of poetry. Inside, the study felt frozen in time. Grandfather's desk dominated the room, its surface covered with papers arranged as if he'd just stepped away. Financial documents, investment statements, correspondence with banks and law firms, everything organized with military precision. But what caught my attention was a leather journal lying open to an entry dated just 2 weeks before grandmother's death. Her handwriting, still elegant despite her age, filled the page with observations about family dynamics and disappointments. "Diane is the only one who visits without wanting something," she'd written. "The others circle like vultures, making calculations they think I cannot see. My sweet granddaughter deserves better than the family that has dismissed her potential for so long." Reading her words brought tears I hadn't expected. Grandmother had seen through my family's facade, recognized their mercenary motives. But more importantly, she'd believed in me when no one else had. The journal continued with detailed observations about Marcus's gambling debts, Sarah's marriage problems, and my parents' financial struggles. Information she'd gathered but never used as ammunition. Instead, she'd quietly arranged her affairs to protect the one family member who'd never asked for anything. As I read, understanding dawned. This inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about proving something to myself and to my family. Grandmother had created a test that would either break me or transform me completely. The 30-day requirement wasn't arbitrary punishment. It was preparation for the responsibility she was placing on my shoulders. Have you ever realized someone believed in you more than you believed in yourself? That recognition can be both liberating and terrifying. The mysterious roses appeared again on day 7, this time accompanied by a plate of homemade cookies that were still warm. Someone was definitely taking care of me, but their identity remained frustratingly elusive. The cookies were delicious, chocolate chip with sea salt, made from a recipe I remembered from my childhood. I'd started leaving notes, hoping to communicate with my mysterious caretaker. "Thank you for the flowers and cookies. I'd like to meet you." But my notes disappeared without response, replaced only by more small kindnesses. Fresh bread on the kitchen counter. A fire already crackling in the library fireplace when I came downstairs. Books moved to prominent positions, all titles about courage and self-reliance. The isolation was getting to me, but not in the way my family had predicted. Instead of feeling trapped or desperate to leave, I was experiencing something unexpected: peace. For the first time in years, no one was criticizing my choices or comparing me unfavorably to my siblings. No one needed anything from me or demanded I justify my existence. I'd brought art supplies, thinking I might have time to paint during quiet moments. Now I found myself creating more than I had in years. Watercolors of the mansion's gardens, charcoal sketches of the library's intricate ceiling, self-portraits that showed changes I was only beginning to recognize. My face looked different in these drawings. Stronger, more defined. The perpetual tension around my eyes had relaxed, and my shoulders no longer carried the permanent hunch of someone expecting criticism. On day 10, while exploring the mansion's third floor, I discovered something that changed everything. Hidden behind a wardrobe in what had once been servants' quarters, I found a narrow staircase leading to an observation room in the house's highest tower. The space was clearly designed for privacy, with windows offering commanding views of the entire property. And sitting in the room's single chair was an elderly woman I didn't recognize. She looked up calmly as I entered, as if she'd been expecting me. "Hello, dear. I'm Agnes. I've been taking care of this place since your grandmother passed." My heart nearly stopped. "You're real." I thought I was losing my mind. Agnes smiled gently. "Very real. I was Eleanor's housekeeper for 40 years. When she knew her time was coming, she asked me to watch over you during your month here. She was worried about your family's reaction to the will. You've been leaving the roses. And the cookies. Eleanor loved white roses. And you always enjoyed my chocolate chip cookies when you visited as a child." Agnes stood slowly, her movements careful but steady. She wanted you to feel supported, not abandoned. The relief was overwhelming. "Why didn't you introduce yourself earlier?" Eleanor's instructions were specific. I was to observe first, help from the shadows, and only reveal myself if you seemed to be struggling. But you're doing better than anyone expected, including yourself. Agnes led me downstairs to a cozy apartment I hadn't known existed, built into the mansion's east wing. Her living space was warm and welcoming, filled with photographs spanning decades of service to my grandmother's family. "Eleanor was very proud of you," Agnes said, preparing tea with practiced efficiency. "She knew your family underestimated your strength. This month isn't really about the money, you know. I'm starting to understand that. It's about proving to yourself that you can stand alone, that their opinion of you doesn't define your worth." As we talked, Agnes shared stories about my grandmother's younger years, her struggles with her own difficult family, and the gradual development of her independence and confidence. The parallels to my own situation were striking and clearly intentional. "Your grandmother left detailed instructions for your month here," Agnes revealed. "She wanted you to discover certain things at the right time, including this." She handed me an envelope with my name written in grandmother's distinctive handwriting. The envelope contained keys and a map of the property, along with a letter that made me understand the full scope of grandmother's plan. "My darling Diane," it began, "if you're reading this, you've met Agnes and proven you can survive 2 weeks of isolation. But survival isn't transformation. What I'm about to show you will test everything you think you know about our family and your place in it." The map marked several locations on the 10-acre property. X's indicated spots where grandmother had buried what she called truth boxes, waterproof containers holding evidence of my family's behavior over the years, financial documents showing their repeated requests for money, recorded phone conversations revealing their true opinions of me, evidence of their manipulation and emotional exploitation. "I gathered this information not for revenge," the letter continued, "but for protection. Your month alone is preparation for the challenges that will come when you inherit substantial wealth. Your family will not react well to your transformation." Agnes accompanied me as I used the map to locate the first truth box, buried beneath the old oak tree behind the mansion. Inside, I found financial records showing Marcus had borrowed $50,000 from grandmother over the past 3 years, always with promises to repay that were never fulfilled. Each loan request came with elaborate stories about temporary setbacks and guaranteed returns. The second box, hidden near the garden fountain, contained recordings grandmother had made during family visits. My mother's voice crystal clear. "Diane will never amount to anything. She's too weak, too emotional. We need to keep her expectations low so she doesn't embarrass the family." Sarah's voice followed. "She's always been the weird one. Thank God she's too passive to cause real problems." Hearing their words, spoken with casual cruelty when they thought I couldn't hear, felt like physical blows. But beneath the pain was something else: clarity. For years, I'd internalized their criticisms, believing their assessments of my character and potential. Now I understood their words reflected their own limitations, not mine. The third box contained the most devastating evidence: legal documents showing my parents had tried to have grandmother declared incompetent 2 years ago, hoping to gain control of her finances. The attempt failed when medical evaluations proved grandmother's mental acuity, but the betrayal ran deep. They love the idea of you, grandmother's letter explained, but not the reality. They need you to remain small so they can feel larger. Your inheritance will disrupt that dynamic permanently. Agnes watched me process each revelation with compassionate eyes. Eleanor hoped these truths would armor you for what's coming. Your family's reaction to your success will reveal their true character. That evening, as I sat in the library surrounded by evidence of my family's manipulation, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The shy, apologetic person who'd entered this mansion 3 weeks ago was disappearing, replaced by someone who understood her worth wasn't determined by others' opinions. I picked up my phone, still no signal, but I could compose a message to send later. "Dear family," I typed, "thank you for showing me exactly who you are. It's made my own transformation possible." But I wouldn't send that message. Not yet. First, I had 1 more week to complete my metamorphosis. The girl who'd been afraid of disappointing others was becoming a woman who refused to be diminished. Day 25 brought an unexpected visitor. I was painting in the conservatory when Agnes hurried in, her usual calm replaced by obvious concern. "Your brother Marcus is here," she announced quietly. "He's demanding to see you, claims there's a family emergency." Through the conservatory windows, I could see Marcus pacing beside his BMW, phone pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, his agitation was obvious. He gestured angrily as he spoke, probably to our parents or Sarah. "Did you let him in?" "Absolutely not. Eleanor's instructions were clear. No family contact during your 30 days unless you initiated it. But he's quite insistent." I watched my brother for several minutes, noting his expensive jacket and new watch. Interesting accessories for someone who'd claimed financial hardship when borrowing from grandmother. His body language screamed desperation beneath the designer facade. "Let him in," I decided. "I want to hear what emergency is so urgent it requires breaking the will's conditions." Agnes looked skeptical but agreed. "I'll stay close, just in case." Marcus entered the mansion like a conquering hero, his eyes immediately cataloging valuable furnishings and architectural details. When he spotted me in the entrance hall, his expression shifted to practiced concern. "Diane, thank God you're okay. We've been so worried about you out here alone." "Really? Because no one's called or checked on me for 25 days. He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "We didn't want to interfere with grandmother's conditions. But this is different. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" Marcus pulled out his phone, showing me a news article. "Patterson's law firm is under investigation for elder abuse and will manipulation. The state attorney general is reviewing all their recent cases, including grandmother's will." My blood chilled. What does that mean? It means this whole inheritance might be invalid. The 30-day requirement, the will itself, all of it could be thrown out. He moved closer, his voice taking on a persuasive tone. "Look, I know we haven't always been the closest family, but we need to stick together now. If the will gets invalidated, everything goes through probate. Could take years. So you're here out of concern for my welfare?" "Of course. And to suggest we hire our own attorney to protect everyone's interests. As a family." I studied my brother's face, noting the telltale signs I'd learned to recognize over the years. The slight twitch near his left eye when he lied, the way his hands moved restlessly when he was manipulating, the carefully modulated tone he used when he needed something. "How did you find out about this investigation? Does it matter?" "The point is we need to act fast." But it did matter. If Patterson's firm was truly under investigation, it would be public record. If Marcus was lying, it meant my family was escalating their attempts to undermine my inheritance. "Show me the official documentation," I said calmly. "What?" "If there's a state investigation, there would be official notices, court filings, something more substantial than a news article. Show me the paperwork." Marcus's confident expression faltered. "I don't have it with me. My attorney is handling those details." "Which attorney?" "Look, Diane, we don't have time for 20 questions. We need to make decisions now." The old Diane would have panicked, would have trusted his urgency and followed his lead. But 25 days of solitude and self-discovery had changed me fundamentally. I could see through his performance now, recognize the manipulation tactics that had controlled me for years. "No," I said simply. "No what?" "No, I won't panic. No, I won't abandon the will's requirements. And no, I won't trust your sudden concern for my welfare." I stepped closer to him, drawing on newfound confidence. "You have 5 minutes to tell me the real reason you're here, or Agnes will escort you off the property." Marcus's mask slipped completely, revealing the angry desperation underneath. "Fine. You want the truth? Dad's in serious trouble. He took out loans against his business using grandmother's house as collateral. If you inherit instead of the family trust he expected, he loses everything. Finally. The real emergency wasn't about protecting me. It was about protecting their financial interests. That sounds like Dad's problem, not mine. Don't be naive, Diane. Family helps family. Interesting. Where was that philosophy when I needed help over the years? Marcus realized his approach wasn't working and tried a different tactic. 5 more days, Diane. You really think you can last 5 more days in this creepy place? All alone with your crazy thoughts? Agnes appeared in the doorway, her presence calm but unmistakably protective. I think Mr. Marcus should leave now. As my brother stormed out, shouting threats about legal action and family loyalty, I felt something settle into place inside me. The old fears and self-doubt were gone, replaced by crystal-clear understanding of my worth and my goals. 5 more days. I could definitely handle 5 more days. In fact, I was starting to look forward to them. Day 28 arrived with autumn's first real snowfall, coating the mansion grounds in pristine white that made everything look like a fairy tale. I stood at the library windows, coffee in hand, watching the transformation with a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. 3 days left, and I was no longer the same person who'd arrived here nearly a month ago. The shy, apologetic woman who'd let her family walk all over her had been replaced by someone who understood her own worth, someone who wouldn't be manipulated or diminished ever again. Agnes found me there, carrying a thick envelope that bore the law firm's seal. "This came by special courier," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "From Mr. Patterson's office." My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, remembering Marcus's claims about investigations and invalidated wills. Inside were 3 documents: a completion certificate for my 30-day residency, a detailed inheritance portfolio, and a letter from Patterson himself. "Miss Diane," the letter began, "I hope your month at the mansion has been transformative rather than merely challenging. Your grandmother designed this experience specifically for you, knowing it would either break you completely or forge you into the woman she believed you could become." The inheritance portfolio was staggering. $2 million in liquid assets, but that was just the beginning. Grandmother had owned rental properties across 3 states, a portfolio of blue-chip stocks, and several business investments that generated substantial monthly income. The total estate value exceeded $6 million. But the real surprise was the final paragraph of Patterson's letter. "Your grandmother also established a trust fund that has been providing anonymous financial support to your family members for the past 5 years. Monthly payments to your parents, your siblings, even covering Marcus's gambling debts and Sarah's credit card bills. They have no idea this assistance came from Eleanor, believing instead that their financial struggles resolved through their own efforts." Agnes watched my face as I processed this information. She never told them? "Eleanor believed people revealed their true character when they thought they were struggling," Agnes explained. "She wanted to see how they treated you when they believed they had nothing to gain from kindness." The manipulation ran even deeper than I'd realized. My family's cruelty toward me had continued even while grandmother was secretly solving their financial problems. They'd had no excuse for their behavior except their own character defects. "There's more," Agnes said gently. "Eleanor left specific instructions for how you should handle their reaction to your inheritance. She anticipated they would escalate their attempts at manipulation once they realized what you'd won." She handed me another envelope, this one sealed with wax and marked, "Open only after completing 30 days. Your grandmother was a brilliant strategist, Diane. Everything she did was designed to prepare you for what comes next." That afternoon, I called Patterson's office from the mansion's landline to confirm my successful completion of the residency requirement. His secretary scheduled a meeting for the following week to finalize the inheritance transfer. "Any complications or challenges during your stay?" Patterson asked when he came on the line. "My brother visited claiming there was an investigation into your firm, something about elder abuse and will manipulation." Patterson's chuckle was warm. "Marcus has quite an imagination. There is no investigation. Our firm has been serving this community for 40 years without a single ethical complaint." "Your grandmother predicted someone might try that particular manipulation tactic?" Of course she had. Grandmother had been 10 steps ahead of everyone, including me. That evening, as I packed my few belongings and prepared for my return to the outside world, I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. The mansion had been my cocoon, the place where I'd transformed from caterpillar to butterfly, but soon I'd have to test these new wings in the real world. Agnes appeared in the doorway of my temporary bedroom, holding a small wrapped package. "From Eleanor," she said simply. "She wanted you to have this before you left." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a locket containing a photo of my grandmother and me from my college graduation. On the back, an inscription: "Strength you already possessed. I simply helped you find it. What do you think will happen when Diane's family discovers the truth about her transformation?" Day 30 dawned clear and cold, with sunshine streaming through the mansion's tall windows like nature's own celebration. I'd completed the challenge that my family believed would destroy me, and instead I felt more alive than I had in years. Agnes prepared a special breakfast: fresh orange juice, homemade blueberry muffins, and coffee so perfectly brewed it tasted like victory itself. We ate together in the sunny breakfast nook, our conversation light but underlaid with the significance of the moment. "What happens to you now?" I asked, suddenly worried about this woman who'd become such an important part of my journey. Eleanor arranged for my retirement with full benefits and a cottage on the property's far edge. "I'll continue maintaining the mansion until you decide what to do with it." Agnes smiled warmly. She hoped you might choose to keep it, eventually. "It suits you." The idea of owning this magnificent property still felt surreal. A month ago, I couldn't afford a decent apartment. Now I was inheriting a mansion and millions of dollars. The responsibility was overwhelming, but no longer terrifying. "Your family will be surprised by the changes in you," Agnes said diplomatically. "They'll be furious, especially when they learn about the trust fund grandmother established for them." Eleanor suspected they might react poorly to losing their invisible safety net. She prepared for various scenarios. At noon, exactly 30 days after my arrival, Patterson's car crunched up the gravel driveway. He emerged carrying a briefcase and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose carefully laid plans had succeeded perfectly. "Miss Diane," he called out cheerfully, "you look remarkably well for someone who's spent a month in isolation." "I feel remarkably well," I replied, and meant it completely. Inside the mansion's formal dining room, Patterson spread documents across the polished table, while Agnes served coffee and those incredible cookies that had sustained me through my transformation. "Before we begin the official transfer," Patterson said, pulling out a sealed envelope, "your grandmother left final instructions to be read only upon your successful completion of the 30-day requirement." The envelope contained a single sheet of paper in grandmother's elegant handwriting. "My dearest Diane, if you're reading this, you've proven what I always knew, that you possess strength, courage, and character far beyond what others recognized. The money I'm leaving you is substantial, but it's not the real inheritance. The real inheritance is the woman you've become during this month of solitude and self-discovery. Your family will not react well to your transformation. They've invested years in keeping you small and manageable, and your newfound confidence will threaten their perception of family dynamics. Be prepared for manipulation, guilt trips, and possibly even legal challenges. But remember, you've already survived their worst. You've proven you can stand alone. Now use that strength to build the life you've always deserved." Patterson cleared his throat. "There are practical matters to discuss. The trust fund that's been supporting your family members will terminate in 60 days unless you choose to continue it. Eleanor wanted that decision to be entirely yours." "They don't know about the trust fund?" "They have no idea. Eleanor was very careful to channel the money through intermediary accounts and third parties. As far as your family knows, their financial improvements came from their own efforts. I thought about Marcus's new watch and expensive car, Sarah's recent kitchen renovation, my parents' sudden ability to take vacations they'd claimed they couldn't afford, all funded by the grandmother they'd criticized and neglected. What happens when the payments stop? Their true financial situations will become apparent very quickly. Eleanor estimated they'll realize something changed within 3 months of the termination. The formal inheritance process took 2 hours. Signatures on dozens of documents, explanations of tax implications, arrangements for managing liquid assets and property transfers. By the time we finished, I was officially one of the wealthiest single women in the state. "One final item," Patterson said, producing a small silver key. "Your grandmother's safety deposit box. She insisted you open it personally, alone." As Patterson's car disappeared down the driveway, I stood in the mansion's entrance hall holding the key and feeling the weight of infinite possibilities. Tomorrow, I would return to my regular life, but everything had changed. My perspective, my confidence, my understanding of my own worth. Agnes appeared beside me, her expression knowing. "Ready for the next chapter?" she asked. "More ready than I've ever been for anything. But first, I had a safety deposit box to open and a family confrontation to prepare for. Grandmother's final lessons were waiting. The First National Bank safety deposit box vault felt like a mausoleum, all marble and hushed reverence. The bank manager, Mrs. Foster, led me through the security procedures with the solemnity reserved for significant financial matters. "Your grandmother visited this box monthly for the past 10 years, she mentioned as we walked toward the vault. "Always came alone, always stayed exactly 30 minutes. Grandmother's box was larger than I'd expected, requiring 2 keys to open. Inside, I found documents that reframed everything I thought I knew about my family's history. The first folder contained my grandfather's real will, not the document my family had referenced over the years, but his actual final testament. In it, he'd left the bulk of his estate directly to grandmother, with specific instructions that it should ultimately benefit the grandchild who demonstrates genuine character and kindness. My family had been operating under the assumption that grandfather's money had been divided equally among his children, with grandmother receiving only a modest widow's portion. They had no idea she'd controlled the entire fortune for 30 years. The second folder revealed why grandmother had been so secretive. Financial records showed my father had attempted to have both grandparents declared incompetent multiple times throughout the 1990s, hoping to gain access to their assets. Each attempt had failed, but the pattern of greed and manipulation stretched back decades. But it was the third folder that truly shocked me. Private investigator reports on each family member, compiled over the past 5 years. Marcus's gambling addiction was worse than anyone knew. He owed money to several loan sharks and had been using family connections to secure additional credit. Sarah's marriage was failing because her husband had discovered her affair and her secret credit card debt. My parents were facing foreclosure on their house and had been hiding the severity of their financial situation from everyone. Grandmother had known about all of it, had been quietly managing the fallout, protecting the family's public image while documenting their private failures. The final item in the box was a video recording, marked for Diane's eyes only. Mrs. Foster led me to a private viewing room where I could watch the recording undisturbed. On screen, grandmother appeared exactly as I remembered her. Elegant, composed, with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Hello, my dear," her recorded voice began. "If you're watching this, you've successfully completed your month at the mansion, and you're ready for the final phase of your inheritance education." She leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more serious. "Your family is about to face a financial crisis of their own making. Without the trust fund support they don't know they've been receiving, their carefully constructed lives will begin collapsing within weeks. They'll become desperate, and desperate people make poor decisions." My grandmother's image continued. "They'll come to you for help, not because they've recognized your worth or want to rebuild family relationships, but because they'll see you as their only available resource. How you handle their requests will determine whether you've truly learned what this inheritance was meant to teach you." The recording lasted 20 minutes, covering scenarios grandmother had anticipated and strategies she recommended for handling family manipulation. Her final words were burned into my memory. "Remember, dear one, you don't owe anyone your peace of mind, your financial security, or your newly discovered self-worth. The people who truly love you will celebrate your success. The others will reveal themselves through their reactions to your good fortune." Driving home from the bank, I felt the full weight of the responsibility grandmother had placed on my shoulders. This wasn't just about managing money, it was about managing family dynamics that had been toxic for decades. My phone had 17 missed calls when I finally returned to cellular range. 13 from family members, 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemail messages told their own story. "Diane, it's Mom. Call me immediately. There's been a mistake with our mortgage company. Hey sis, Marcus here. Need to talk to you about something urgent. Family stuff. Diane, this is Sarah. I know we haven't talked much lately, but I really need your advice about something." They didn't know about my inheritance yet, but their financial support systems were already beginning to fail. Grandmother's timeline was proving remarkably accurate. I deleted all the messages without returning a single call. 2 weeks after leaving the mansion, I was settling into my new reality when the explosion happened. Not a literal explosion, but the moment my family discovered the truth about my inheritance and their own precarious financial situation. I was in the middle of my first meeting with a financial advisor, discussing investment strategies and charitable giving options, when my phone erupted with calls and text messages. 23 missed calls in 30 minutes, all from family members who had apparently learned about my windfall. The first text message from my mother was typical. "How dare you keep this secret from us? Family shares important news." Marcus was more direct. "We need to talk. Now." Sarah's message revealed how they'd found out. "Mrs. Peterson's neighbor saw you driving a new Mercedes and called Mom asking about your sudden wealth. Explanation required." I'd purchased the Mercedes the day before, a modest luxury considering my new financial status, but apparently flashy enough to attract neighborhood attention in my old working-class area. The financial advisor, Mr. Westbrook, noticed my distraction. Family complications from sudden wealth? Something like that. Very common. Money changes family dynamics in ways people don't anticipate. The key is establishing boundaries early. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for what I knew would be a confrontational family meeting. Everyone's cars were already in the driveway. Clearly, this had been planned as an intervention. I entered to find them arranged in the living room like a tribunal. Mom and Dad on the couch, Marcus in Dad's recliner, Sarah perched on the chair arm. Their expressions ranged from accusatory to calculating. "Sit down, Diane," Dad commanded, pointing to the chair facing them all. "We need answers." "About what specifically?" "Don't play dumb," Marcus snapped. "Mrs. Peterson told Mom you inherited millions from grandmother. Why didn't you tell us?" I studied their faces, noting the desperation beneath the anger. Mom's makeup couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes. Dad's clothes looked worn, and Marcus's usually perfect appearance seemed slightly disheveled. "I wasn't required to share personal information," I said calmly. "Personal information?" Mom's voice rose. "This is family money. It affects all of us. How does my inheritance affect you?" The question hung in the air while they exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Your grandmother's estate should have been divided among all her grandchildren. This concentration of wealth in one person goes against family values." "Which family values specifically? The ones where you tried to have her declared incompetent? Or the ones where you borrowed money you never repaid?" Sarah's face flushed. "That's not fair. We all struggled financially while grandmother hoarded money like some crazy miser." "Actually," I said, reaching into my purse for the documents I'd brought, "grandmother wasn't hoarding money, she was giving it away. To all of you." I placed the trust fund documentation on the coffee table. "For the past 5 years, grandmother has been providing monthly financial support to each of your families. Marcus, your gambling debts, paid by grandmother. Sarah, your credit card bills, covered by grandmother's trust. Mom and Dad, those unexpected windfalls that helped with house repairs and vacation funding. All grandmother's money." The silence was deafening. I watched understanding dawn on their faces, followed quickly by panic as they realized what this meant. "That's impossible," Marcus said weakly. "The trust fund terminates in 45 days unless I choose to continue it." Grandmother left that decision entirely to me. The family meeting devolved quickly from there. Accusations flew about my manipulative grandmother and my own selfishness. Demands were made for immediate financial assistance. Threats about contesting the will were thrown around like weapons. Through it all, I remained calm. The month at the mansion had prepared me for exactly this reaction. "You're all welcome to contest the will," I said finally, standing to leave. "But you should know that grandmother documented every attempt you made to access her money over the years. Patterson has recordings, financial records, even private investigator reports on your activities." I headed toward the door, then turned back. "I'll be making my decision about the trust fund based on how this family chooses to treat me going forward. So far, the evidence isn't encouraging your continued support." As I drove away, I could hear shouting from inside the house. But for the first time in my life, their anger didn't affect me. I was finally free. The legal papers arrived 3 days later, delivered by a stern-faced process server who found me at my new apartment. My family was contesting the will, claiming grandmother had been manipulated and that I had exercised undue influence over her final decisions. I called Patterson immediately. "We expected this," he said calmly. "Eleanor prepared extensively for legal challenges. How quickly can you get to my office?" An hour later, I sat in Patterson's conference room while he spread evidence across the mahogany table like a general planning a decisive battle. "Your grandmother began documenting your family's behavior 5 years ago," he explained, pointing to neat stacks of papers. "Financial records, recorded conversations, video evidence, private investigator reports. She built an airtight case against anyone who might challenge her final wishes." The evidence was devastating. Recordings of family members discussing grandmother's mental state and their plans to access her money. Bank records showing Marcus had forged checks from grandmother's account. Documentation of my parents' attempts to sell grandmother's belongings without permission. "But the strongest evidence," Patterson continued, pulling out a thick folder, "is this psychological evaluation Eleanor completed 6 months before her death. She wanted to ensure no one could claim mental incompetence. The evaluation, conducted by 3 independent doctors, declared grandmother mentally sharp and fully capable of making financial decisions. She'd even anticipated the specific challenges my family might raise." "How long will the legal process take?" I asked. "With this evidence, 6 weeks maximum. Your family's attorney will realize quickly that they have no case." But Patterson wasn't finished. "There's something else. Eleanor left instructions for what should happen if your family contested the will." He handed me a sealed envelope marked, "Nuclear option, use only if necessary." Inside were documents that made my hands shake. Evidence that my family had been stealing from grandmother for years. Forged checks, unauthorized credit card use, items taken from her house and sold without permission. The total theft exceeded $50,000. Eleanor never pursued criminal charges because she hoped family relationships could be salvaged, but if they force a legal battle, she wanted you to have the option of filing criminal complaints. The nuclear option, indeed. I could send my entire family to prison. There's more, Patterson said gently. Eleanor anticipated you might feel guilty about defending yourself against family members. She left you this. The final envelope contained a handwritten letter. Dearest Diane, if you're reading this, your family has chosen legal warfare over family harmony. Don't let guilt or misplaced loyalty weaken your resolve. These people have shown you exactly who they are. Believe them. You've already tried kindness, patience, and forgiveness. They responded with greed and manipulation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow people to face the consequences of their choices. You are not responsible for their problems. You are not obligated to fund their mistakes. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Stand firm, dear one. You've already proven you're stronger than they ever believed possible. That evening, I made my decision. Not about the criminal charges. That felt too extreme. But about the trust fund and any future financial support. I drafted a letter to be delivered to each family member. The trust fund that has been supporting your families will terminate as scheduled. There will be no financial assistance from me going forward. I've learned that supporting people who don't appreciate it only enables their worst behaviors. If you choose to continue the legal challenge to grandmother's will, I'll be forced to present evidence of your financial crimes against her over the years. The choice is yours. I signed the letters and arranged for delivery the next morning. By noon, my phone was ringing with calls from family members wanting to discuss things rationally. Marcus left a voicemail saying they were dropping the legal challenge and just wanted to work things out as a family. Too little. Too late. 6 months later, I stood in the mansion's conservatory, watching Agnes tend to the white roses that had become my grandmother's living memorial. Sunlight streamed through the glass panels, creating rainbow patterns on the floor where I'd once painted watercolors of my transformation. The legal challenge had collapsed within 2 weeks, exactly as Patterson predicted. My family's attorney withdrew from the case after reviewing grandmother's evidence, explaining that pursuing the challenge would likely result in criminal charges against his clients. The financial consequences had been swift and brutal. Without the trust fund supporting them, Marcus filed for bankruptcy within 3 months. Sarah's marriage ended when her husband discovered the full extent of her debts. My parents lost their house and moved into a small apartment, forced to downsize dramatically. But the most significant change wasn't their financial ruin. It was my complete emotional freedom from their manipulation. I'd established my new life carefully and deliberately. The mansion became my primary residence, filled with artwork and books and the kind of beauty I'd always dreamed of surrounding myself with. I started a foundation focused on helping young women escape toxic family situations, understanding intimately how difficult it was to break free from psychological manipulation. Agnes remained as property manager and had become something like the grandmother I'd always needed, supportive without being controlling, proud without being possessive. "Any regrets?" she asked, joining me in the conservatory with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of those legendary cookies. "None," I replied, and meant it completely. My family had made a few attempts at reconciliation, but their efforts revealed they still didn't understand what they'd done wrong. Marcus wanted a loan to get back on his feet. Sarah suggested I buy her a house for family unity. My parents had written a letter explaining that families should stick together through hard times. All their requests focused on what I could do for them, not on acknowledging their past behavior or making genuine changes. I'd learned that real family isn't determined by blood relations, but by mutual respect, support, and genuine care. Agnes showed me more family love in 1 month than my biological family had provided in 28 years. "Your grandmother would be so proud," Agnes said, settling into the chair beside mine. "You've become exactly the woman she knew you could be." Through the conservatory windows, I could see the grounds where I'd once walked as a scared, uncertain person, hoping to prove herself worthy of inheritance. Now I understood that I'd been worthy all along. The inheritance had simply been grandmother's way of helping me recognize my own value. My phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte, my college friend who'd become my closest confidant through this transformation. "Dinner tonight? I want to hear about your plans for the scholarship program." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely, I have so much to tell you." The scholarship program was my latest project, funding college educations for young women from difficult family situations. Applications were pouring in from across the state, each one a reminder that I wasn't the only person who'd struggled with family dynamics and self-worth. As the sun set over the mansion grounds, painting everything in golden light, I felt the deep satisfaction of a life being lived authentically. Not the life my family had planned for me, not the small, apologetic existence they'd tried to maintain, but the bold, purposeful life I'd chosen for myself. Grandmother's inheritance hadn't just given me money, it had given me permission to become who I truly was, and that transformation, it turned out, was worth far more than any amount of money. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions. Sometimes the most important inheritance is the one you give yourself. The mansion stood strong against the evening sky, a symbol of endurance and transformation, just like the woman who now called it home.